Imagine coming home one day and realizing your entire life has crumbled in an instant. Your wife? Gone. Your job? Destroyed. Your home? No longer yours. And all because you thought you'd get away with cheating. Well, this guy found out the hard way that karma doesn't play around. And when you mess with the wrong person's wife, you just might lose everything. Way back in the early 2000s, I began to suspect that my wife was up to something. Our 2 kids were about 4 and 6, still young, but not so young they couldn't tell you something about what had happened in their day. They started talking a lot about staying with my wife's parents during the day, which wasn't really that strange in and of itself. But since they lived about 90 minutes away, doing so 2 or 3 times a week seemed a bit much. That was basically every day she wasn't working at her part-time job. When I asked her about it, she denied it, but was never a good liar. So I started tracking the mileage on her car, and sure enough, she was driving an extra 400 or so miles per week. I knew some shit was going on. Then one day I sat down at the computer, and she had left a sticky note with her AOL password written on it next to the keyboard. I could not resist and logged in to read her emails and saw a few email exchanges between her and her college BFF where they discussed how my wife was regularly fucking one of her ex-BFs from high school. No mention of details about him other than my wife also talking shit about his wife, making fun of how she'd gotten fat after having kids. Anyway, I printed out these email exchanges and stashed them. I still needed to know the details, so I called a friend who was a cop, and he suggested I call a guy he knew that had left the force to become a PI. Ron was great. I paid his retainer and gave him the emails and what little I knew about my wife's activities, and he figured out exactly what she was doing. His report detailed with photos and time/date/locations, all about how she would take the kids to her parents, then go meet this guy for lunch. Then they'd go to a dumpy motel for a few hours, after which he'd pick up the kids and return home. At this point, I hired a divorce lawyer. My parents cheated on each other, and the fallout absolutely fucked mine and my siblings' childhood. It was something that was totally unacceptable. I also asked Ron to find out what he could about this guy. Ron absolutely came through. I learned his name, Bob, that he was married and had 3 kids. I also found out that he worked as a VP of sales for his father-in-law's business. At this point, I had my lawyer draw up the divorce papers. I also asked Ron for a couple more copies of his report, and one more thing I wanted him to do for me. On the same day, I had my wife serve with the divorce papers at her work. I had Ron meet with this guy's wife and show her everything he'd found out. She seemed nice, and I figured that she deserved to know what her dear hubby was up to. What she did with that information was up to her. While the information about my wife's infidelity didn't really matter in my divorce proceedings, Bob's wife did a real number on him. According to the publicly available court documents from the divorce and other related proceedings, she cleaned out their joint account, took the kids, and left. As soon as her dad found out what he'd done, Bob was fired, and since her parents actually owned the house where Bob and his wife lived, he also got evicted. Their divorce was ugly, lots of fighting in and evidently out of court. I guess Bob went to the house and started arguing with his wife, and it escalated to the point that her brother stepped in and Bob got his nose broken. There were restraining orders, a few more incidents with police reports, criminal charges, jail time, and so on. I can't find Bob on the internet anywhere these days. Last I heard, he'd left the state, and his ex-wife did okay. She went to work at her dad's company and took over after he retired. As for me, my ex and I got along well enough. I didn't engage with her on anything that wasn't related to the kids, and now that they're both adults, I don't talk to her at all anymore. I don't hate her or anything, but I only care in the context that she is my kids' mom and is important to them. Nothing beyond that. So what do you think? Did he go too far? Or did Bob get exactly what he deserved? Let me know in the comments. We have a second story for you today, and this one takes revenge to a whole new level. If you thought the first story was satisfying, just wait until you hear how this high school student got back at their evil substitute teacher. This occurred way back in my junior year of high school around 2002. I was in a computer class. It was a very general class where we learned how to type, but also got a little familiarity with stuff like Adobe Photoshop and Music Studio. The teacher who normally taught the class had a baby prior to the semester that I took class, so a substitute teacher covered her entire maternity leave. The substitute was a complete bitch. The fun and entertainment I got from the original teacher's typing class that I had taken a semester before was now replaced by an evil woman who expected us to be professionals at programs we had only just learned about. Nobody in the class had higher than AB average. She dumped on my first Photoshop assignment because she didn't like the subject matter. It was a mech robot with a Gundam-inspired energy sword that I drew in color by hand, taking me nearly a month to complete. I used Photoshop to clean up some of the rough edges and make it look even more realistic, a feat that should have been awarded high marks, but because she hated the subject matter, it got AD+. The next week, we started our segment on Music Studio. Her assignment was to create a music clip that sounded weird or funny. I found a synth wave in a program labeled Final Crash and played it to myself, a descending crescendo followed by a final beat in an upbeat chord. Using the software, I created a loop of this sound clip and reversed it, playing the sound forward and reversed in repeating patterns for about 15 seconds. My fellow students found the resulting music to be hilarious, but the teacher absolutely hated it, even going into dry heaves at the sound of it. She gave me a 0 on the assignment and threatened me with detention if I ever played the sound again. I was already on the brink of failing my class prior to this because of the way she was grading my work. So this was a determining factor for me to take revenge. I didn't mind a few detentions from a teacher I disliked if it meant making her life a living hell for a few weeks as a taste of the hell she put me through. A friend of mine worked for the IT of the school as part of his aspirations to get a computer science degree. I gave him the offending sound clip, and he notified the teacher that he needed to perform an update on her computer during her lunch break. My class was after her lunch, so I got to see my revenge in all of its glory. My friend went into the sound files of her computer and replaced all of her notification sounds with a 3-second piece of this sound clip. Every time she received an email, instant message, or any other warning from her computer, this sound would play at nearly maximum volume. The added bonus being that to prevent students from tampering with teachers' computers, they needed to input an IT password to access the control panels and turn it off. It was an IT password they didn't share with substitute teachers because of access to grading and transcripts. Substitute teacher had a complete meltdown after just 2 emails from IT about computer update. She sent me to the office and tried to have me expelled because of this sound. Our principal laughed her out of the office. Substitute teacher unplugged her computer and took emails and instant messages on her phone for the entire duration of the final 2 weeks of class. The other students in my class used to play the sound clip from their computers to annoy her. We even managed to get the sound clip played during the morning announcements, which I can only imagine made her throw things at the television. When the original teacher returned from her maternity leave the beginning of my senior year, she changed my grade in the previous semester's class from AD to an A+ after reviewing my assignments. Revenge achieved. Also, Bitch's substitute was asked not to return to my school district as a substitute for the rest of her teaching career. Edit 1. An added bonus to my revenge that someone said shouldn't be a comment. About 2 weeks into summer vacation, we emailed the sound clip to the DJ at her favorite radio station and got the clip played on the air at random hours of the day for about 3 weeks. I'm sure this bitch's substitute will never want to teach computer class ever again. We told them that she was a beloved teacher, and we wanted her to know that we were still thinking about her. They fell for it and played the sound clip at least a dozen times per day for nearly 3 weeks. Now that's how you handle an unfair teacher. Let me know in the comments. What would you have done in this situation? And don't forget to like and subscribe for more incredible stories.